another. The way it is going to go tonight, each candidate is going to be allowed a 2-minute opening and a 2-minute closing remark. They're instructed if they go over the time limits, their microphones are going to be cut off. Mid-sentence, doesn't matter. Once your 2 minutes is up, time is over. We have Sandra and Arthur Bilson from the Toastmasters here who are keeping track of the time. They have 3 colored cards that they're going to show up so that the candidates know how much time they have left. Brad from Exeter Music is the one who is controlling the microphones. He sees the red card goes up, the microphone gets cut off. We have approximately 45 minutes for written questions this evening. Murray Workman, who is standing over, leaning up against the wall there. If you have any questions that you would like to be read out tonight, write it down. You can flag him down, and he'll take it over to our panel of Huron County directors that are sitting on the side. We're going to go through the questions to make sure that we don't have 3 or 4 people that want to ask the same question. So that way then it'll be 1 question asked instead of 4 questions asked, 4 of the same questions asked 4 separate times. Then at the end, after those 45 minutes, there will also be a 30-minute time period in which you can come up and ask a question directly from the microphone. The candidates sitting to me from left to right, we met in the back room and we scientifically chose who was going to be number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We all picked a number out of a hat. So from left to right, this is the order that the opening statements are going to be presented in first. Starting number 1, 2, and then following that with the first question, we're going to start with number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, and so on in that order. For the closing statements, it's going to be done in reverse order: 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So to start with, the first candidate that we have speaking tonight is Ronald Stevens. He is an independent candidate.
I want to thank everybody for showing up. That's numero uno. The second part is, I think most of you are farmers, are you not? And we have to protect our farmland, which is being taken down. And the plan is, make no mistake about this, the plan is to privatize all the farms, just like they privatized our electrical and gas systems without your consent. And this is all about the globalist agenda, okay? And you have to understand these things, okay? Because we have a duty to those who come after us. And what's going on is not nice. Okay, and what it says here, preserving farmland is the key to protecting domestic food production. Now, Brian Mulroney, and make no mistake, every ex-prime minister in this country is still pushing the agendas forward for the globalists. Now, Brian Mulroney is attached to the Century Initiative, and they want to increase the population of this country to 100 million people, which we don't want, okay? And there's a whole lot of stuff that you people need to know, and I wish that you would all go to CanadianTruths.wordpress.com and look up H1N1, which is the same thing as the COVID. I need 8 hours. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Next up, number 2 is Jerry Heenematter, representing the Ontario Party.
Well, I want to thank the organizers of this for hosting this and our debate and giving us all a chance to talk to you. And I want to thank the Ontario Party and Derek Sloan for allowing me to be their representative in Huron-Bruce. And, you know, I grew up in Ontario. I was born here in rural Ontario. I'm now a mother and a grandmother. My parents, both of their families were farmers. I spent a lot of time, you know, prior to being 20 years old on farms. I am very much about the earth and farming and whole foods and everything that, you know, goes along with preserving that. I ran in the 2018 election because I'm really very concerned about what we are leaving for our children and our grandchildren. I don't like the things that I'm seeing in our government on all levels. And that's what I'm doing here, because I want this to be as great a place for my children and grandchildren as it was when I grew up. And I know that things have changed and, you know, life changes, but Ontario was once the economic engine of this country, and now we are a have-not province. And that just has to change. I can sit at home and bitch about it, but this is what I'm doing about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate number 3 is the Honorable Lisa Thompson, the Minister of Agriculture, representing the Progressive Conservative Party.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank the Huron Federation of Agriculture for hosting this meeting tonight, because it's very important that we have an opportunity to discuss provincial policy that regards and postures our amazing powerhouse agri-food industry for playing such a pivotal role in Ontario's rebuilding of our economy. There's so much potential in our provincial agri-food sector, and I can tell you, since I was 11 years old, dying to show my first 4-H calf, through to being a very proud Huron County 4-H member, and throughout my career, and even as serving as the 40th Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, I have given everything I have to listen, to take appropriate action, so that we can garner the support to ensure that everyone in this province understands what our agri-food system represents in this province. And I can tell you, growing up in East Wampanoag and in Huron County, just outside of Belgrave, and marrying into Bruce County, the farm I call home now has been in my husband's family for over 120 years. My passion is genuine. And I look forward to the discussion this evening, because again, this is about discussing Huron's priorities for advancing the agri-food industry overall in Ontario. Thanks for having us this evening.
Candidate number 4 is Shelley Blackmore, representing the Ontario Liberal Party.
So I would like to begin by thanking the Huron County Federation of Agriculture for hosting tonight's event. It's important that issues in the agri-food industry that are critical to our local economy get sufficient attention. And I thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself and to share my party's platform. As I've been campaigning across the riding, it has been a pleasure to watch farmers back on the land, getting the crops planted for another season, and taking advantage of the great weather this past week. My name is Shelley Blackmore, and I'm a retired principal. I worked for the Avon-Maitland District School Board for 38 years. I have always taught or been a principal in a rural school. My husband David and I live on a farm in Howick Township. We have 3 children and 6 grandchildren. I've also been a board member of the Huron First Center for Youth and Children and held leadership roles as a volunteer for the United Way for Huron. I was also a foster parent. In all of these roles, I've been an advocate for those who need help, and I see my role as your MPP in much the same way. I don't have all the answers, but I know where to find them, and I'll work hard to find the solutions for my constituents. In Huron Bruce, a good understanding of agriculture is important, and I believe my experience in agriculture will be an asset. My husband and I lived on a farm in Howick Township where we raised a flock of sheep and sold our lamb and wool. I was a 4-H leader running a sheep club. We also raised free-range chickens and had horses. On our farm in Howick Township, where we live right now, we rent our workable land and have pasture and horses. I've lived on a farm for over 30 years, and I value our unique rural way of life. However, I know there are many challenges facing our agricultural community. The Liberal Party is committed to protecting our farmland and supporting your industry. And thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening to speak with you.
Our next candidate is Laurie Hazard, representing the Ontario NDP.
I'd like to begin by thanking the Huron Federation of Agriculture for hosting this. As you know, my name's Laurie Hazard. I grew up in Holmesville where my father was a farmer, but eventually had to sell the farm and work in town because the farm didn't support 2 families. My summers as a child involved the way the farms went. We started by detasseling corn, then we went to picking cucumbers and tomatoes. And in Wallaceburg, the kids are all still getting on buses in the morning to detassel corn. My adult expertise is elsewhere. I've worked in both healthcare and education, and as you know, we need vibrant and reliable, well-funded healthcare at schools if our children and grandchildren are to survive and thrive in Huron County. I do communicate regularly with John Van Off, our agriculture critic, who, interestingly enough, has been championing many of the issues that we're probably going to talk about tonight. When the NDP was the Ontario government, we developed programs that are still in place. Many governments later, the Farm Business Registration Program and the Environmental Farm Program. And that's because they've lasted because we worked with farmers to create those programs. Agriculture is one of Ontario's main drivers. We contribute more than $47 billion to our economy. And we support close to 1 million jobs in the province. As we look to the future, we're going to have to continue to work together with the agricultural community to address the challenge of climate change. We need to provide more help to farmers so that they can become more resilient and realize the potential for sequestering carbon by adopting regenerative farm practices, which increase soil organic matter. We have a doable, responsible, and responsive plan to support agriculture and agribusiness. And as we move forward, we won't take a step without input from you. Thanks for hosting this event, and I look forward to an interesting discussion tonight.
And the last candidate for tonight is Matt Kennedy, representing the New Blue Party.
Thanks very much. If this is a game show, I'm looking forward to seeing what the prize is. My name is Matt Kennedy. I do represent the New Blue Party of Ontario. I was born and raised in Kitchener, where I met my wife. We moved out to Exeter about 3 years ago. In Kitchener, I went to school for business, where shortly after I worked for one of Canada's largest life and health insurance companies, overseeing the rollout of product development and design. In 2019, I realized what was a lifelong dream of working for a large municipal police service. And while it was a very rewarding experience and something that I would never trade for the world, that dream came crashing to a bit of an end. Although it still goes on in some fashion, but I was put on unpaid leave in November of 2021 for not complying with my service's vaccination policy. Around that time, while I was speaking up for what I thought was wrong, what was happening, my service persecuted and oppressed me, ridiculed me out of the job, and demonize me with many of my fellow coworkers who I once worked so closely with. It was around that time that I learned about the New Blue Party and what they stood for. The party was created in 2020 by Jim and Belinda Carajalios. Belinda is the representative for the Cambridge riding, and she was kicked out of the Ontario PC caucus in 2020 for voting against Doug Ford's lockdown legislation. So I really liked that Jim and Belinda have a proven track record of standing up for what they believe in. That quality is really important to me as somebody who believes in the same and who has demonstrated my ability to do so and to continue to fight for what I think is right. Thanks very much.
Thank you everyone for your opening remarks. For the next 45 minutes, we have some written questions. I have a copy of the questions up here. I'm going to read it out, but it will also, the question that we are currently on will be on the screen on the side so that everybody can see it and so that the candidates can also see it. So question number 1 is, what is your party's long-term strategy regarding energy and fertilizer needs to meet the needs of all of Ontario? So for this question, we're going to start with Jerry Heenematter and work our way down towards Matt at the end of the table, and then come back here to Ronald Stephen to be the last person to ask this question. So the same rules for this. They have 2 minutes to answer each question. At the end of 2 minutes, the microphone will be shut off.
Well, we've had about 20 years of government, 2 different labels of government that have caused surging energy costs. That, I mean, today you can't drive down the road and not see the price of gas and diesel. And just imagine how that affects people. So if we just talk about the current government, you know, they told us that they were going to fight the carbon tax, and well then, you know, apparently the court said they couldn't fight the carbon tax. And they said they were going to reduce the cost of energy, but then they created their own carbon tax that they put on big emitters. And of course that just trickles down to the rest of us. And so one of the things that we would do would be to reduce on gasoline and diesel, reduce the Ontario taxes on that. Also, we believe in bringing a pipeline from the west to, say, Thunder Bay, and then transporting oil to Sarnia instead of allowing Saudi ships that are coming into the Great Lakes and unloading in Sarnia. Those are just some of the things that we would do. We also believe that all of Ontario needs access to lower costs on energy. And we have some, you know, true green ideals. And, you know, those are things that we want for all of Ontario, not just Southern Ontario, but also Northern Ontario, which also has a lot of potential that is not being
So the question was interesting, and it's talking about long-term strategy for energy and fertilizer. So I have to share with you that after 14 years of inaction from a Liberal government that turned a blind eye to Ontario's agri-food industry, we made it a priority under our PC government to ensure that we did everything we can to, first of all, again, listen, evaluate where we're at so we could take an appropriate action. And first and foremost, we heard the need for the expansion of natural gas. And that was a priority, and we've delivered, and we will continue to deliver on that very thing, because the access to natural gas, affordable natural gas, is pivotal, especially in the fall during harvest time, when people rely on that to dry their crops. You know, and again, it's being responsive. Ontario farmers deserve a government that's being responsive. And I remember when there was the concern over Line 5 and propane. I was in Sarnia that evening, And I made a call to Minister Mulrooney that very night and said, we need to make sure our propane trucks get filled and get moving, and be mindful of the need to move that propane as efficiently as possible without any burden. And we acted on that as well. And we have a Minister of Energy that has worked very, very hard to bring affordable energy prices to the farm gate and to our farm businesses as well. In terms of fertilizer, I can tell you 2 days prior to the RIP being dropped, I was in Ottawa advocating on behalf of Ontario farmers, letting the federal minister know that we need our fertilizer here in Ontario. And with that said, I think there's going to be some relief that needs to continue to be spoken about, but we're addressing how can we bring fertilizer at an affordable rate to Ontario farmers. Stay tuned.
Thank you. So in regards to energy needs, the Liberal government certainly will continue to expand the natural gas profit that's been currently being provided to farmers. We will also offer for farms to gradually shift to using more electric. We know at this point in time that we do not have electricity for vehicles, and so instead we will work with the federal government to increase carbon tax rebates. That is in our platform. We'll provide money for retrofits for barns and buildings, such as LED lighting and other energy saving measures. And as far as fertilizer needs, yes, we need to get more fertilizer plants here in Ontario so that we're not depending on transport from other provinces. And we'll also encourage using natural fertilizers. So places where they are we're actually composting. And we can be composting town waste and giving it to farmers to use as natural fertilizers. So those are some of the ideas on those topics. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. The Ontario NDP has formulated an amazing Green New Deal, and it works with climate change and energy. Doug Ford in 2018 vowed to bring our hydro rates down by 12%, and that hasn't been the case. We will work very carefully to try and bring down the price of electricity. We'll regulate the price of gas, and we'll move to more renewable energy. But the Ontario NDP has a just transition policy where no one will be left behind. So as we move to a more renewable energy focus with electricity, we'll make sure that we give grants and supports to all industries, including agribusiness, to transition to electrical equipment. And that includes giving money to put charging stations in their barns and everything else. We'll redo the cap and trade system. Right now, farmers are being penalized unfairly for grain drying and for the amazing work they do in carbon sequestering. And we'll actually, in our cap and trade system, lower the prices for rural Ontario and Northern Ontario. You shouldn't have to pay a penalty for grain drying. We'll make sure that if you have woodlots or you sequester carbon, we'll certainly make sure that you get a rebate on your cap and trade. And in fact, in our new cap and trade system, 25% of all of the money that we receive will go directly back to rural and Northern Ontario. We'll work with families, and we'll also work with the Ridgetown campus of the University of Guelph to come up with ways to find energy solutions for farmers, biogas, and all kinds of other opportunities. And finally, we'll make sure that you have the fertilizer that you need, and we'll work with farmers, and we'll make that happen. Thanks so much.
We certainly do live in a very energy and resource-rich country, and certainly to that point, a very energy and resource-rich province. The problem that we've had for a long time is governments and governmental policy that handcuff and constrain business and individuals from accessing and fully enjoying those resources. We have a federal Liberal government who seems dead set on keeping our Albertan oil in the ground, as opposed to using it in this very country, and instead importing dirty and oil that represents areas of extreme conflict instead of meeting Canada's energy needs domestically. Provincially, rather than challenge Trudeau's carbon tax, we have a current provincial government that not only did not oppose that federal carbon tax, but instituted their own version in this province. So the problem for far too long has been government policy that interferes with people's ability to access cheap and affordable energy and resources. The New Blue Party has a plan to reduce energy costs first and foremost by tearing down and canceling the contracts of the windmills, which are very notable in this riding especially. Kathleen Wynne came out earlier this year and admitted that those windmills were a bad deal. And there have been a number of independent studies that have confirmed that they have resulted in an increased energy cost to Ontarians to the tune of tens of billions of dollars since their erection. We would also seek to cancel the Ontario carbon tax and oppose the federal one as well.
The energy system here in Canada, or in Ontario, was privatized. And it started with Morris Strong, who was the godfather of Bob Rae, and it went on to the Conservative Party, Harris, and they privatized our entire electrical and gas system without the consent of the people. The reason that your gas and diesel prices are going through the roof, and diesel used to be a lot cheaper than gas, and now it's a hell of a lot more expensive. And fertilizer and that's going up, and the people on the East Coast are suffering like hell because of what the governments are doing. And the governments are not working for you, okay? You gotta understand this, okay? The governments are not working for you. Every ex-prime minister is still pushing, every ex-prime minister that's alive is still pushing the globalist agendas through on you. Now you need to go to the UNPA, United Nations Parliamentary Assembly, go to supporters, go down the list, hit Canada, and you will find 863 MPs and senators all pushing the agendas upon our people and our nation. None of these people are working for you. They want everything privatized, and that includes all farmland in this country. And that's a fact. I already tried to do it in India.
Okay, thank you all. The next question that we have is not the one that is on the screen. I am paying attention up here. I will read the question out until they get the technical difficulties sorted out. If elected, will you support processing infrastructure funds for Ontario to assist the industries such as beef processing in adding the needed capacity to service domestic and international markets? Would you like me to read it again before they hand it up? Okay. If elected, will you support processing infrastructure funds for Ontario to assist the industries such as beef processing in adding the needed capacity to service domestic and international markets? So with this question, we will start with Lisa Thompson and work our way down.
In one word, absolutely. Do you know, the PC Party of Ontario recognizes the potential that the agri-food sector can play in rebuilding our economy, and adding value right here at home is absolutely part of our strategy with regards to food security and a stable supply chain. And we are already doing it. We're getting it done. through the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. We're seeing our local processors expand and realize their dreams, but we also are supporting processors through our rural economic development funding as well. Again, we're addressing needs, listening to people, and most importantly, not being afraid to bring new programs. For instance, as soon as I took this chair, I had heard loud and clear from family members and neighbors and colleagues, we needed more processing. And so I was so happy when in the fall, the finance minister and the premier agreed to enable me to introduce a $25 million strategic processing fund. In addition to that, we introduced a $22 million agri-tech innovation program. And hand in hand, those programs have just taken off. The ATIP program in particular, the Agri-Food Technology Innovation Program, we enabled 170 projects across this province to bring value-add opportunities closer to where our food source is created. And that $25 million processing fund has been oversubscribed, and I can't wait to see what applications meet the grade and get that seed money. Most importantly, I mentioned seed money, and it's amazing what can happen when you have a government like the PC government of Ontario create an opportunity where people want to once again invest in Ontario. It wasn't happening before 2018, but it's happening now. We're getting it done.
So the Liberal Party of Ontario knows that food security is a top priority, and we've heard over and over in our meetings with people in agriculture and different OFAs that food processing plants are one of the weakest areas in that food chain supply. And so we see the small abattoirs. When we had our sheep, we were able to go near Atwood, and we had a lovely little butcher and abattoir, and we could process those. But because of regulations with food safety, many of those operations said they had to close down, and it was going to be too expensive. And that's unfortunate, because if we had funded those smaller abattoirs, we might have been able to enable that. And I think that's important because people want to buy local. I like to have farm to table opportunities. So in terms of the local areas, we will provide money. We'll listen to the farmers groups. We'll find out what kind of facilities are needed depending on your commodity, and we are committed to giving you funds to expand processing all across our Huron and Bruce. We also know that we do not have enough workers, and one of the really important ways that we can get people to work in food processing is to provide apprenticeships. So for instance, apprenticeships in butchering for the beef industry, because they are very short and skilled people who can actually process meat. And so we will provide a $2,000 incentive for students who choose to go into apprenticeships in the food processing area. And we'll also bring in internationally trained professionals and allow them to work in those facilities as well. So those are just some of the ways that we are going to respond to that issue. Thank you.
Another great question. Yes, the NDP will totally support food processing and beef processing and all processing locally. We need the infrastructure to do that, so we'll continue to support the building of roads and bridges and all of the things that we need to do to get our crops and our animals to market. In Huron County, 10,000 people are employed in the agri-food business, and there are 2,500 farms. 735 acres are dedicated to agriculture, and we generate $1.8 billion in the Ontario economy. And our policy is keep it close to home. So stay close to home, food security. We have a food program where we'll go food to table, support our farmers so that you don't have to send your food far away, include processing here in the county. And one of the most exciting things, I think, is our funding for innovation hubs. So these will be hubs of people. And again, I want to talk about the the Ridgetown campus of the Guelph University, where we're going to work on innovative ways to, again, minimize the amount of time the food spends on the highways going to food processing plants far, far away, and we'll do it close to home. So in a nutshell, yes, the NDP is absolutely committed to keeping food processing close to home, and we'll provide the means and ways for that to happen.
Much like the problem of skyrocketing gas prices due to a war halfway across the world, on the topic of local food security, I think a large part of the problem is that we're sending our raw resources out of country to be processed, only to be purchased back at a higher price. This is definitely true with the agri-food business. I've heard from far too many farmers that there is simply not enough local beef processing capacity, that any new capacity, they're often having to wait a year or more. And that just simply seems unacceptable. I'm hearing that work is being done, but it's obvious to me that in my conversations with farmers that not enough is being done. And when I hear that small processors have had to close their doors due to overregulation, it seems pretty obvious to me that rather than try to fix a problem that's born from government interference with more government interference, the simple answer would simply be to deregulate and allow the free market to meet the needs of the local economy. I'm certainly in favor of expanding the strength of our local economy, keeping more goods here in the local economy and processing it into its end product, and reducing our dependence on the global markets and the possible disruptions that are prone to happen with those.
I hate to break this to you, but they actually want the beef industry gone. Because the beef industry is creating climate change, which is another fraud in the globals. And they have a cricket factory in London, Ontario. And we got this chicken problem going on now, of which they've killed approximately 2 million chickens. They actually want to starve you out, okay? That's the plan. And make no mistake, they want, as Kissinger said, 99, something has to take the place of government, and business is the obvious entity to do it, but it's not your business. It's the boys at the top, okay? And you will have control of nothing. And they will cut our energy, they will cut our food, and we have to understand that we have a duty to our communities, our province, our nation, and the young people. Now, Tinkerbell Trudeau is a part of the UNPA, and I'll talk about Doug Ford later. But we all have to wake up, okay? All of this nonsense has been thrown down your throat and into your mind for so long. It's not for your benefit, okay? It's for the globalist benefit, not yours. And they want to take us down.
Well, the Ontario Party believes that food security for all people in Ontario is of utmost importance. We need more processing facilities, and we would do everything possible by encouraging business investment, by lowering energy costs and getting rid of the red tape of getting into business and getting, your zoning and all of those kinds of things. And we also believe that a lot of the processors should be closer to the farmers. We would for sure invest in highways and bridges in rural areas so that we can facilitate these things. We encourage organic foods and meats because we believe in healthy food, not lab-grown foods, and not insect foods. Farm to the table as efficiently as possible is what we need to do. That means less government interference. Thank you.
Thank you all for your answers. I've been informed that we're having technical difficulty with posting the questions up on the screen. So I'll attempt to read them very clearly once or twice so that everybody knows. Here's what the question is. The next question is, how will your party deal with the financial difficulties of rural hospitals forcing cuts of staff and services disadvantaging rural residents? I'll read it once again. How will your party deal with the financial difficulties of rural hospitals forcing cuts of staff and services disadvantaging rural residents? So our first respondent this time is Shelley Blackwell.
So we know that rural healthcare has its own challenges, and I think all of you out there have probably had that issue. You went to the emergency department and it was closed. You couldn't get an appointment with your family doctor for months on end, or you had to drive your sick relative all the way down to London to get the care that you needed or the specialists. So it is a crisis. And the Liberal Party of Ontario knows that we need to invest in rural Ontario healthcare. We are different. We have a lot more challenges than the urban areas. And so we will guarantee that we have equal access in rural areas. So we will guarantee that everyone who lives in rural Ontario will have access to a family practitioner or a family doctor. And we'll do that by paying tuition for family doctors and nurses who are willing to train and stay in rural areas. We're also going to remove the barriers that prevent internationally trained professionals from working in our system. There are a lot of people out there with qualifications, but they can't, there are too many barriers to getting qualified. We're going to repeal Bill 124 and ensure our nurses are paid a fair wage and have full-time positions. We'll also raise PSW wages to at least $25 per hour. We will train and hire 1,000 nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers over the next 6 years because many of those people are in the baby boomer stage and they're going to retire. So we have to plan ahead. So our investment of home care of $2,000 billion annually will also relieve some of the pressures on our hospital systems as well. So the Liberal Party has healthcare and rural healthcare as a #1 priority. Thank you.
So this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. As you know, I was a nurse. I've worked in small rural hospitals, I've worked in northern hospitals, and I've worked in big city hospitals. And I can tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, rural healthcare is better. It's better because it's more holistic, because it's more community focused, and we're going to continue to build on that. Technology enables us today to do amazing things in healthcare. We're going to immediately repeal Bill 124. We're going to immediately hire 10,000 PSWs. We're going to increase the number of nursing spots in universities and colleges. We're going to hire 30,000 nurses, which is what the Ontario Health Coalition says we need. We're going to start a program to bring retired and recently retired nurses back to assist younger nurses and mentor them as they begin their career. We'll create a job matching program with internationally trained physicians and nurses. Yes, there are many with credentials, but they're not Ontario credentials, and there is a process for getting them trained to be good Ontario nurses. We'll take immediate action to begin hiring 300 doctors for rural Ontario, and we'll have more nurse practitioner-led clinics, and we'll stop fighting with midwives so that we have good maternal health care in rural Ontario. The other thing that we're going to do is include mental health in our OHIP, so that if you need mental health or anyone in your family does, they won't have to spend money out of pocket to get the help that they need. So we're going to expand our community health centers, and we're going to make sure that rural health stays in rural Ontario. Thank you.
Healthcare is certainly an issue that is not new. The issue was not born in the pandemic or from the pandemic. This is an issue that goes back decades through multiple successive governments who have simply punted the problem back and forth, avoiding any real or meaningful long-term change or investment in actually improving healthcare services to most people in this province. One of the things that's often overlooked is one of the best ways to reduce the burden on hospitals is to keep people out of them in the first place. New Blue Party would seek to provide more coverage for alternative services for people who are seeking to make real meaningful changes to their long-term health and to stay healthy and to stay out of the hospital. We have a very reactive medicine approach in this province and certainly in this country, and we need to shift that focus to more of a preventative focus. Healthcare for the longest time has represented one of the taxpayers' largest expenses on their tax bill. For too long, we've been unable to ask the real questions about where that money is actually going and to conduct a fair analysis of the value that we're getting for all that money that we pay. The New Blue Party would also seek to conduct a comprehensive review of the expenses in the healthcare system and ensure that more of that money is being spent on the frontline nurses and doctors and alternative service providers. It doesn't make sense to me that somebody who wants to go see their naturopath, who cares about their long-term health and to seek alternative, safe, and proven treatments, has to do so out of their own pocket, as opposed to the numerous services that can be accessed on an unlimited basis through the current OPIC program. We would look to make strategic investments in the healthcare system in order to arrive at a solution that actually delivers more care at the end stage to people accessing it.
The problem with healthcare is that your food is full of toxins, which makes more and more of our people ill. And that's a fact. And also, this fraud of the COVID nonsense put the hospitals in a terrible position where people couldn't go to the hospitals and people are still suffering. They didn't get their operations, they didn't get anything because of this COVID thing. Now, if you go to canadiantruths.wordpress.com and you put in H1N1 and go down to Arlene King, the documents are there. They're not my documents, they're their documents. And they said in 2007, if we don't have a pandemic within 5 years, we may lose our business model, okay? And that's what it's about. It's about the cash, not about your health, okay? And we, the people, have a duty to put things back the way they're supposed to be. So our people are healthy, and we have a proper healthcare system, of which we don't have right now. It's a freaking mess. And it's about money. You get sick, the doctor writes you a prescription, okay? And that pays the pharmaceutical company. And so we have to come to terms with these things. These things that these mainstream media or mainstream candidates are telling you is a crock of nonsense. But go look at H1N1
Well, the Ontario Party would, first of all, hire back any of the healthcare workers that have been fired over, they worked the whole 2 years just to get fired because they made a choice for their body. And it has to be my body, my choice. That cannot just apply to some people, but not other people. So that's one of the first things that we would do. We would do a review of the hospital spending. There's so much waste in hospitals, you know, they do not need to change out all the TVs every year. You know, I've heard of people lining up at the garbage can because they know all the TVs are going out tomorrow and they want a free one. That's just one of many things going on in our system. We would encourage alternative healthcare, naturopaths, massage therapists, all different kinds of, you know, those alternatives. And healthy lifestyles. I mean, when over the last 2 years did you really hear anyone in your government talk about taking some vitamins or, you know, encourage healthcare or healthy lifestyles? No, instead, you weren't allowed to walk down the street for a period of time. Kids were not allowed to play in the park. Come on, this is just, it wasn't about an illness. And how about paying doctors and nurses what they're worth? They haven't had a raise in a long time. Optometrists, you know, in Ontario, for services that the government paid before, they were the lowest paid in the country until they decided to stop giving services to seniors.
You know, I don't know how many people saw the Maclean's article that profiled Premier Wynne back in the winter. And she's a very honest person, and I respect her immensely for that. And in that article, she noted that had she known the pandemic was coming, they would have not made the cuts that they had. And the number of nurses were starting to erode dating back to 2015. And I have to share with you that when we came into power in 2018, one of the first things we did was recognize the value of local partnerships and collaborations. And we wanted to bring the focus down to a local level. And we introduced local health teams. And I was never more proud when I heard that the Huron Perth health team was one of the first five local health teams approved to operate. And it's a collaboration of hospitals and service organizations and delivery organizations in Huron and Perth. And they're doing everything they can to identify priorities and help with the system. In tandem with that, I have to share with you that the funding from the federal government eroded as well. We used to get 50% of our hospital costs transferred over to us. You know, when we went into power in 2018, we were receiving 20%. That's not acceptable. And Premier Ford went to fight for that. And as a result, we're making historic investments in hospitals. We're expanding the offering at the Goddard Hospital by 4 beds. We are introducing so much more in terms of attracting nurses. Nurses that are graduating and they pledge 2 years of service in rural or Northern Ontario will have their tuition fees waived and paid for. We have a number of really important initiatives that are coming together, such as new equipment as well. New doctors want new equipment.
Question number 4. We know there is a huge demand for graduates of agricultural programs in the province. Do you have a plan to address the labor issues facing all facets of the economy? First speaker to this question is Lori Hazard.
So Ontario's farm labor shortage currently sits at 29,000 workers, and that results in $1.5 billion in lost sales. Mental health care plans, dental, pharmacare, for people in agriculture, they're not a good workforce, and they're not a strong workforce unless they're supported. Agriculture offers strong and good paying jobs to people who've been caught up in the unstable gig economy over the last number of years. And we're welcoming them, we will be welcoming them to rural Ontario. We have a focused promotion of agriculture and agri-food programs in community colleges, high schools, and universities. And we're increasing the number of co-op programs, or we will increase the number of co-op programs in high schools, colleges, and universities to look at agri-food careers, which will hopefully encourage young people from all over Canada to come to rural Ontario, specifically Huron Bruce. We'll expand the Ontario Immigrant Nomination Program so that people from new countries, when they come to Canada, can also find a good, stable, well-paying job that pays the bills in rural Ontario. And finally, we need to increase prioritize skill development and training throughout the value chain so that we can encourage people to come here and then when they get here to stay here. And finally, one of the biggest problems that I hear about when I talk to people in agri-food is housing. And it's one thing to offer people a great paying job, but it's something else to not have a house to live in. So our very expansive and aggressive housing policy will create stable, safe houses in the communities in which the young people want to live, so that when they do accept a job in the agribusiness sector, they'll have a good place to live. Thank you.
For a long time, I believe our high schools have unfairly and indiscriminately pushed their students towards post-secondary education. Oftentimes, these students go to colleges or universities and get degrees that they never end up using and accumulating a significant amount of student debt in the process. We need to get back to a system in the high schools, if not earlier, that recognizes, rewards, and incentivizes those students who seek to pursue careers in the agricultural industry by streaming those students at an early age, by focusing their education on the subjects and the material that will be important and useful to them in those careers, instead of unnecessarily always pushing for post-secondary education. As part of that, we can do a better job of incentivizing businesses to hire apprenticeships by subsidizing apprentice wages during the first few years of training. We also need to make sure that those engaging in those apprenticeships are making a living wage during that time as well, and that they can meet their basic needs and feel that they're excelling. In speaking about labor issues facing all facets of the economy, especially agriculture, I think it's important to address the trucking issue that has been building for the last few decades as well. 20 years ago, the trucking industry was ringing the alarm bell about a shortage of truckers and trucking infrastructure in this province, and very little has been done to address that. We need to get back to incentivizing the creation of new warehousing facilities, which will help to facilitate an increase in trucks on the road and truck drivers. And we also need to incentivize people to enter that industry again, as we've seen far too many people leaving it, again, due to over-regulation and far too many burdens.
You don't need graduates of agriculture or graduates of most anything. People who have the right attitude will go to work, but they've messed up the young people so badly through fear of climate, fear of COVID, that most of the young people don't have a proper attitude anymore. When I was in marketing and building houses, we had the best people you could ever ask for because they had the right attitude. And they made our young people fearful. And that's the mainstream media's fault and the mainstream candidates' fault, because they keep pushing this crap on the young people. And it's very difficult to find anybody that wants to work anymore. And as my father said, when we were building houses and he was a bugger to go, he said, "Where did you get this crew? I've never seen a crew like this before." And I said, "It's about attitude. And we have to bring up the attitude of our people so they become strong again, not weak like they've been made. And then we have a country again. But they don't want you to have a country. And make no mistake, we have a duty. And we must fulfill that duty. Thank you.
Well, we have to keep our graduates in the province. However, the high cost of living and the lack of housing security is a really big problem. And how does the average 25-year-old deal with that? They move to another province or maybe another country even, and they take their agricultural knowledge there. And Ontario loses again. I can tell you, I know firsthand how bad the housing shortage is here in Huron County. I myself have been forced to move 3 times in the last 5 years as a renter because the property was sold. And I now pay 3 times as much for my housing as I did 5 years ago. And I'm not the only one. I know it's a huge, huge problem that nobody seems to want to address. So the Ontario Party, number one, they recognize that this is a problem across the entire province, and they have a plan. One part of the plan is to allow more multiple housing units. So you could have, even having, you know, an in-law suite or an extra place for another generation to live in your home, or for farms that need workers, having, you know, the ability to have extra apartments as part of the property. That's one of their solutions. But we need a living wage and we need housing to keep our graduates here. Also, small business incentives for these graduates to start their own farm or their own business.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is something that's always been near and dear to my heart. And I can tell you that when I was first elected to Queen's Park in 2011, I was vice chair of Ontario Agri-Food Education. It was an organization of agricultural champions, if you will, that were dedicated to making sure that we had curriculum developed by commodity organizations that could be used easily in the classroom to further promote the industry that we love, the agriculture and food industries. And we continue to support, as a ministry and as a government, that particular organization. And then, fast forward a couple of years after being elected, I introduced a private member's motion that received unanimous support. And that motion spoke to the fact that we needed to make it mandatory to teach about agri-food careers in grade 9 and 10 career and guidance curriculum. Again, it got unanimous support. Ladies and gentlemen, we're already doing so much, but there's more to be done. For instance, Farm Food Care is another organization that had lost its funding prior to our government coming into power. And what did I do this past year? I reinstated the funding because they're doing an amazing job out there. And again, we need to take a look at how we incorporate and embrace international agricultural workers. These last 2 years, I can tell you, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs has worked diligently with the Minister of Labor to make it easier for international workers to come in. Currently, right now in Quebec, 20% of manufacturing and processing lines can have international workers. We're restricted to 10% in Ontario. And let me tell you, if I'm re-elected, that's going to get parity with Quebec. And furthermore, we need to be embracing innovation and technology. And we need our commodities to lead in that regard, because with technology and with innovation, autonomous vehicles and everything make a difference.
So most sectors in Huron Bruce are struggling to find workers. As I go from business and towns and different professions, everyone is saying that we are struggling to find workers. One of the main barriers to attracting and maintaining workers is finding affordable housing. So we certainly have an extensive housing platform to try and find those solutions. We need to do a better job of welcoming newcomers to our communities. Because when people come here, sometimes it's hard to fit in and they don't stay. They try it out and then they don't stay. So we have to become more welcoming. We will also bring in more internationally trained professionals with the skills that we need. Our new arrivals from Ukraine are anxious to find jobs in their host communities, and we would facilitate those types of transitions. We will also support migrant workers who are so essential to our ag sector. We will continue to support education programs that provide job skills. So we plan to bring back shop classes in grades 7 and 8. That was a travesty when they were gone. We will also support education programs like the high skills major in agriculture and encourage more co-op education in our high schools to attract, train, and retain our own students in our local sectors. We want our children to have opportunities right here in Huron Bruce so they don't have to move away. We will support post-secondary education programs like those at Guelph and Ridgetown by freezing tuition and doubling OSAP, as well as giving those who go into apprenticeships $2,000 grants to complete those apprenticeships and add to the labor force. Thank you.
Question number 5. What is your party doing to help seniors stay in their own homes longer, staying out of nursing homes and long-term care? So the first candidate to answer this question is Matt Kennedy.
This is certainly a topic that is near and dear to my heart, as my father was diagnosed with dementia at the ripe old age of 57. And I can tell you, I was only able to spend as much time with him as I did because of the in-home care that he received, mainly through the organization CCAC. And a New Blue Party, like I said prior, in expanding healthcare options and alternative service providers, we are committed to expanding the investment in healthcare to include services that help seniors and those living with diseases like dementia to stay in their homes longer. Often when we talk about healthcare, nurses and doctors take up the bulk of the conversation, but equally important are the PSWs and the registered practical nurses that are going to people's homes and providing those services. All too often I've heard from those same people that they have to work for numerous companies because they can't be full-time with one company. And they're bouncing around. They don't have job stability. They don't have wage stability. They are frustrated. They feel underappreciated. And it's time that those people are given the respect and the dignity that they deserve for the role that they're playing in helping our seniors and certainly our aged parents stay in their homes, stay out of the hospitals, and stay out of the long-term care homes.
That's very interesting. My in-laws, some of the family wanted to put them in a home, which is really just a jail. They have no freedom. And I don't go there. And just like my grandparents and my great-grandparents, they lived at home until they passed. I sold my cottage. I went and found a property with 2 houses on it. And I renovated the front house for my in-laws and had to tear the back house down and rebuild it. But my in-laws were super happy, extremely happy, because they were free. And this is all this political garbage, you know, put your family in the home, do this, do that, do that. And we have a duty to the young people, we have a duty to the old people, because we are the community. And we have an obligation to the people in our communities. And we have to start acting like men and women again. Okay? And, you know, if you've ever been in a home, I've been in these homes. I did some work in some of these homes, and I had a lady fall out of the bed, and I said, "You want me to go get the nurse to come and get you?" "No, don't call them. I'll get in trouble." This is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. So yes, we all have an obligation to the young people and the old people, because there are people, okay? They don't belong to the state, okay?
Well, Ontario Party realizes that we do need more home care workers, more people who can go into the homes and help with the care of the seniors living in the homes to keep them from having to go to long-term care. It's my understanding, I've had friends who, you know, have had a spouse with something like multiple sclerosis and things like that, and they get, you know, 1 hour of help every 3 days or 3 times a week or something like that. Not even enough time to go to the doctor yourself when their spouse needs full-time care. You know, I mean, I remember a day when you could get home care workers coming in for 4 hours every day for some people, or, you know, 2 hours every day, depending on, you know, what was wrong with the people, but not anymore. People are lucky to get an hour a couple times a week. And also we need to appreciate these workers because, as was previously stated, they feel underappreciated. They only get part-time work. I know a lot of people who moved out of the commercial system into private, and you know, that for them, that was what was working for them. But not everybody can afford private home care. We need more incentives to keep our seniors in family homes and to be cared for by their family. That may be grants, tax incentives, that sort of thing, to, you know, so that families can afford to keep them there. Long-term cares, homes have just been sliding downhill. And the care that seniors get, I mean, you know, they're limited to 3 diapers a day kind of thing.
Ontario has no better champion than Minister Raymond Cho. He is just an absolute dynamite who leads with his heart. He is Minister for Seniors and Accessibility. And he is just so on the ball. For instance, he hooked me up with a trade meeting with Korea to talk about Ontario beef going into Korea. Set that aside, he also appreciates the need to have a rural lens on caring for seniors and thinking about accessibility. And to that end, I introduced him to Julie Sawchuk. And guess what? Julie Sawchuk is chairing his Provincial Accessibility Committee. And I'm so proud of that. And our government, if re-elected, we are absolutely committed to investing $1 billion into home care, because we know people want to stay securely and safely in their homes. And to that end, we'll be having a tax credit to help offset the cost of seniorizing your home, if you will, with the grab bars on the bathtub wall and possibly towers for toilets. The list goes on and on. But most importantly, we also need to think about mental health, and we need to think about isolation. And this brings me to the McKay Center in Goderich. Our government has been funding amazing programs for that senior center, and they're extending their reach throughout the county of Huron. For instance, some of the funding we gave that center enabled them to employ technology that brought seniors together via Zoom meetings for activities and discussions and interactions, not only through the pandemic, but also it's happening. And we've given them money to hire more staff. And it's that type of programming that really brings value and and pleasure to seniors and gives them confidence to stay in their home longer because they have that interaction, whether it's in person or virtually. Thank you very much.
One of the platforms I'm most proud of in the Liberal Party is our long-term care platform, and we call it a seniors revolution. We need to learn from the pandemic. What happened to our seniors who were living in long-term care homes was a travesty, and that can never happen again. We will immediately get rid of for-profit long-term care because shareholders should not be making money on the backs of our senior citizens. Our main goal is to allow people to stay in their own homes and age in their own homes. And we will provide grants for retrofits to make homes safe. And we also will commit to $2 billion per year for the next 4 years for home care investments. And that will allow PSWs and nurses to come into homes instead of having people maybe having to move to long care before they're ready. We know that at some point in time, people to get to the point where they do need the level of care in a long-term care home. So we need to raise PSW wages to $25 per hour and make sure those are full-time jobs so that they're not traveling from home to home. That's how infection spreads among our elderly. We want to have the Denmark model of small community-based homes with access to community services. There will be no more warehousing of seniors in huge long-term care homes that are being built right now with 100 and 200 people living in the same home. So the seniors built our country and they deserve our respect and they really deserve our care. So I think we all need to rethink how we're going to age. I'm a baby boomer. I don't want to age that way. So I think I'm very proud of what the Liberal Party is offering for seniors and long-term care. Thank you.
We know that home care costs half of what it costs to care for a senior in a home. The NDP will immediately align home and community care services to communities' needs, and we've sent focus groups to both Sweden and Denmark to look at what they're doing in home care, and we would like to follow a lot of their models. Having said that, you need to have enough PSWs to take care of people in their homes. So we'll immediately hire 10,000 PSWs to work in home care and increase their wages to $25 an hour. But they also need benefits, and they'll start an Ontario benefits program to be able to support them with the kind of benefits they need to have a decent life and to pay their bills. The other thing that we need to think about is that 4,000 people died in long-term care during COVID, and the majority of them were in private long-term care situations. So one of the things that we're absolutely committed to do, the Liberals and then the Conservatives have privatized long-term care. We will immediately begin a plan to bring that back into the public sphere, and we'll make sure that once we do that, we'll establish provincial standards for both long-term care homes and community care. The last thing that we need to think about is, keeping people in their homes. I was kind of laughing about what Lisa said because I was one of those folks who helped in the Zoom. I taught ukulele by Zoom to Alzheimer's patients. And it was really fun, except that some of their funding just got cut. So these wonderful programs where we can spend time with seniors, the funding's been cut. So we'll reinstate that funding, and we'll work in as many ways as we can to keep seniors in their homes as long as they can.
Thank you. That ends the written questions that have been submitted. We do have time now for 2 questions to be taken from the floor. If you come up to ask a question, even if your question is directed to a specific candidate, all of the candidates that are up here will have the chance to answer the question. The specific candidate will get the chance to answer it first, and then we'll follow in the same order that we've been using all along. They will have the same time frame, 2 minutes to answer the question. I ask that if you do come up to ask a question, please do not have a long-winded wind up to your question. Come up, ask your question so they have the chance to answer it. Okay? So Murray is sitting beside the microphone to control traffic. So if there are any questions, feel free to go up and ask it. Now's your chance.
The majority of Ontarians want a just transition to the new economy that's just around the corner. So I would like to ask everybody on the podium what their party is going to do to bring this about. Thank you.
Could you please repeat what your question is? They would just like clarification of what your question is.
I'm talking about a just transition from the present economy, which is an economy which is fueled by the petrochemical industry, and it's somewhat elitist, where the people at the top of the food chain, the elite, the managers of big companies, are very well taken care of. And we just heard the people who look after our elderly people in nursing homes don't have enough money to get by groceries. Does that clarify things a little bit? Does anybody understand that on the podium? Thank you.
Are we good? Okay, so since Matt answered the last question first, we're back at the beginning here with Ron has the first chance. 2 minutes.
The simple answer is that we, the people, are the power. We really don't have a government. When government passes things through the legislature without the consent of the people, and they must have the consent of the people when they pass something through the legislature, what they are is an oligarchy. And they pass any damn thing they want through there without your consent. We the people, not the so-called politicians, our forefathers came here to build us a new house out in front of the boot of tyranny. We allowed the boot of tyranny to be put back on us. And people have been screwed over for a very, very long time. And we and our forefathers built everything in this country, meaning this country belongs to the people, not the government. And we have to come to terms with that, okay? Our forefathers who came here, they understood what was going on, and they had a very strong mind, spine, and spirit. And our people have become so freaking weak. It is absolutely pathetic. And I'm looking at this young guy over here, and he doesn't have a future if we don't do what we're supposed to do, and that's act as men and women for the benefit of our people. We got 33 million.
I would just ask that we please refrain from using any harsh language in our addresses tonight, please. Respectful language only.
Well, I really believe that we, the people of this province and this country, have not been heard by our governments for a very long time. And that's exactly why Derek Sloan is running the Ontario Party. And everyone that is a part of the Ontario Party feels exactly that way. We need to establish a government that listens to the people, that makes decisions based on what's good for the people, not what's good for them and their elite, as you call it, that are running their show. Because really, you know, if we just take Doug Ford, he's just like a mannequin in the window of the shop. And it's what's going on in the back room that's really important, but they don't tell us what that is most of the time, or sometimes they do tell us. But honestly, we need a government that's going to listen to us, the people, if there's going to be a future for our children and our grandchildren.
I appreciate the question very much, and I'm going to make it relevant to the theme of the evening, the theme of the debate, which is agriculture. And, you know, when we think about the chemical industry, so to speak, I want to take it to where we are in Ontario in terms of being good stewards of the land. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that Ontario farmers are second to none when it comes to their environmental practices. You know, in the spirit of reducing chemicals, we have embraced the concept of 4 R's, product. You know, what we want to make sure we're using the right product in the right place at the right time at the right rate. And with technology and with innovation, we're embracing, you know, precision agriculture. So we're not broadly applying a chemical to a field, but with GPS, we can apply a specific herbicide or an insecticide to an affected area in a field, and that's progress. And that's the reduction of the dependency on chemicals, if you will. You know, another thing that we can't overlook is how Ontario farmers have embraced environmental farm plans. Again, this program is an example to be followed throughout Canada and North America. And then I think about phosphorus loading. Again, it's our government of Ontario and our farmers that are doing everything we can to reduce phosphorus loading in Lake Erie. And we've got amazing programs to protect Lake Simcoe as well. You know, the list could go on, but I'm going to stop this time before my mic gets cut off. But it's something we need to embrace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So my interpretation of your question is really about economic dignity and the difference between the very rich in this province and the very poor, and how we're going to address that. And so our party has thought long and hard about economic dignity. First of all, we'll raise the minimum wage to $16, working towards a living wage, because someone who lives in Toronto needs to earn more per hour than we do here in Huron-Bruce. We will also raise the Ontario Disabilities pension benefits by 20%, which still doesn't even barely get them out of poverty. But then we need to really reform that whole system. And one of the things we're looking at is a guaranteed basic income demonstration project. We started it with the Wynne government. It was really showing great results for people, and it was canceled by the Ford government. The guaranteed basic income gives everybody in this very rich province at least a basic amount of money so that they can live and in a home and afford their food. And then the proof of basic income is that once those needs are met, people will strive to better themselves and to earn more money. But if you look at our seniors, many of them are living in poverty because they don't have a big enough pension, and same with people who can't work, who are disabled. We will tax the top corporations that somehow seem to not pay their fair share in our society. We will raise taxes for high income earners over $500,000 per year. But the middle class, the rest of us who are working hard day in and day out, we're certainly not going to touch our taxes. So that's some way that we can start to address the fact that our country is growing more and more into a divide between the very rich and the very poor. We need to bolster our middle class. And that's what our party plans to do. Thank you.
On Monday, I had the privilege of talking to a grade 10 class of civics kids, and they asked me what the difference between the parties was. And I told them, think about a pie that your mom makes, or your dad. And all of the different parties have a different idea of who gets a larger and smaller piece of the pie. So I explained to them that the NDP wants everybody to have a piece of that pie. We have to think about in 50 to 70 years, there are not going to be any fossil fuels left in the world. That's the current scientific thought. So we have to think about climate change and a just transition to net zero. And we have to move to a different kind of energy, renewable and electricity. So we're going to help folks with that. We're going to provide $600 to every family to put in charging stations. We're going to retrofit homes and we're going to retrofit buildings. And when we fix schools and public buildings, we're going to make them net zero emissions. We're going to reinstitute the liberal basic income. We're going to restart that. We're going to increase the minimum wage to $20 an hour over 4 years. We're going to double the ODSP. And the only people, the Ontario Disability Pension, I actually spoke with a woman who's disabled and told me that she had asked her doctor for medical assistance in death because she makes so little on ODSP, she doesn't have enough food enough money for food at the end of the month, and she relies on food banks. We're also only going to increase the taxes for people who make over $200,000 a year and for people who are for large corporations to try and minimize the tax burden on those of us who are in the lower and middle class and people like me who are pensioners. So we do have a plan to make sure that people are able to live in dignity and grace and make enough money to pay the bills after doing an honest, hard day's work.
New Blue Party believes in promoting fair and free market above all else. Markets that are influenced by unnecessary or overbearing government intervention too often create monopolies and seek to reward lobbyists and friends of the parties responsible for that spending above others. That is in part responsible for the economic disparity that I believe this gentleman was speaking to. Case in point is the windmill project spearheaded by Kathleen Wynne and the Liberal government at the same time that Kathleen Wynne's brother was serving on the board of 2 renewable energy companies. So if we want to talk about spreading the wealth, we certainly need to look at the effect of lobbyists on our government and the effect of internal party fraud as well. New Blue Party believes in promoting free and fair democracy at all aspects, including right down to the party level. Belinda Carahalios introduced private members bill that would seek to end and criminalize internal party fraud, and that bill was killed at committee. New Blue Party would seek to immediately offer some relief to individuals and small businesses by cutting the HST from 13% to 10%. I believe that you and our small businesses are better determinants of how to spend your money, because at the end of the day, all government spending is really your money, and more of it should be put back into your pockets to spend as you choose.
Thank you. This will be the last question that we have time for to take from the floor tonight. Go ahead.
Okay. In light of the damning results being reported for those who have received their 3rd COVID booster, when will your party be calling back to work all employees let go because they exercised their freedom to reject the experimental vaccine?
Jerry Niedermatter has the first crack at this question.
Well, immediately. We believe that everyone has the right to choose for their body. They have the right to choose medical treatments that they undergo. No government should be able to force any kind of medical treatment on you. And I remember, this going way back when I was a child, there was a lot going on around Jehovah's Witnesses who would refuse blood transfusions. And in the end, they were allowed to refuse blood transfusions. And now today, we do see a lot of doctors who will do other alternatives to, things like that. So why was this made such a political issue? It's our body and our choice, and that cannot be allowed for some people and some procedures, but not others. These kinds of things cannot be forced on us as a people, especially when the vaccine is still an experimental medical procedure. Cannot force that on anyone.
Well, one thing that I value about being a progressive conservative is that we want to get government out of the way of doing business. And when I reflect on that question, and I think about some of the things that we've heard this evening, I think it's really important to recognize that during the pandemic, we're following the advice of the Chief Medical Officer of Health, and then bring that down to the local level. And right here in Huron Bruce, we had hospitals with different approaches. Some hospitals did not require that their employees have that second/third shot, and while other hospitals did. Similarly for police forces, my understanding is in Ottawa, the police force required their employees to do a test on a regular basis, where other forces clearly in southwestern Ontario took it a step further. So again, I think we need to encourage all employers to recognize that in the province of Ontario, mandates were lifted in the middle of March, March 21st, and we need to let people know that we have a plan to keep open. The Ontario PC Party has brought in 90% of all PPE needs now, and they're being manufactured either here in Ontario or in Canada. We never had that at the start of the pandemic. In fact, it was the Liberal government that absolutely let that cupboard go bare. Similarly, we are ensuring that schools and hospitals and long-term care facilities have what they need to stay open. And I really admire the amazing work that has been done throughout Huron County in the spirit of keeping people safe in all of our congregate settings. Thank you.
So most of us, when we were young as children, had to have vaccines. We had to have vaccines to go to school. That's why we don't have polio. That's why we don't have diphtheria and things like that. So, the scare is that how did we get a vaccine developed so quickly? Well, we did because we are very incredibly, our science has moved so far forward, and internationally we're able to connect with scientists. And so I guess I will tell you that the Liberal Party follows the science. So no, we would not immediately hire everybody back unless it was safe to do so. There's no pat answer. We have to look. The science tells us, this disease tells us it's changed. We've had all kinds of different variants. You only had to see the people that were dying in long-term care homes. As soon as people were vaccinated, those death rates went way down. We're almost to zero. Those of us, the millions who chose to have the vaccine, created herd immunity for all of you who didn't. So I really have to tell you that, yeah, we would not do the mandates immediately.
So I'm going to put my nurse hat on for a minute, and I'm going to talk about grand rounds. So large hospitals, I worked at the Children's Hospital in London until '94, and they used to have what were called grand rounds. And in 1994, I heard about mRNA vaccines, and that was a method for mRNA as a way to give cancer treatments. So I get a little bit touchy when people say that it's not tested, because mRNA has been around for a very long time. There's nothing unscientific about it. And the NDP, like the Liberals and the Conservatives, followed the science. I think, sometimes the good of the many supersedes the good of the few. And I would the NDP will not lift that mandate until we know that it's safe to do so, and we will follow the science. And I'm just going to add one more thing. As a nurse, I know lots of nurses still who are exhausted and absolutely at the end of their tether. Many of my classmates are still working. And when they have to go through picket lines to get into work, and they're treated horribly by people who don't believe in the vaccines, it's incredibly disrespectful. So So from my perspective, it's your choice, absolutely. If you don't want to get the vaccine, don't get it. But we wouldn't in any way be interested in lifting those mandates until the science tells us that we can.
The answer is easy for me. My choice was between my job and my livelihood or homelessness and destitution. And I don't consider that a choice. The New Blue Party would immediately hire back all fired employees who are affected by the vaccine mandates and ensure that they're compensated. Vaccine passports, vaccine mandates, lockdowns are violations of our charter rights and freedoms. They should never have been made into legislation. I would personally lead the call for an investigation into the decisions that led to the legislation that was made and the decisions that were made. We would also seek to enact new legislation that makes new vaccine passports and new vaccine mandates illegal and unable to be done by a future government. I know that this is a divisive issue, but for those purporting to follow the science, I will say that science is not black and white. It is not yes and no. And as long as we have voices in the scientific community being stifled and silenced, we cannot purport to say that we're following the science.
Just another fraud, but I would really like everyone to go and look at canadiantruths.wordpress.com, go down to H1, just put H1N1 in the search engine, and go down till you see Arlene King, who was the head of public health in Ontario. And the WHO, Gavi, Bill Gates, all the rest of these clowns, stated that we had to have a pandemic within 5 years, okay? The documents are there. You need to read them so you understand the fraud that they keep pushing upon our people. Now, if you go to Bill Gates at TEDx, he said we were going to have a pandemic, or not a pandemic, excuse me, an epidemic within 5 years. Now, just when I was a reporter during the Saudi oil crisis out in Calgary, they called it alternative energy. They just take the sheet off the wall again and say, well, we'll call it renewable energy now, we'll use it again. And the same thing with the epidemic, which was the Spanish flu, where everybody was forced to wear a mask. He also said it could be bioterrorism, okay? These people are not working for your benefit or your health, okay? And I really want people to go and look at that H1N1 thing for Arlene King, because all the documents are there. And now, in those documents, they're telling you the truth, not the crap you hear on media or from the politicians. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our allotted time for questions tonight. We're going to go to the closing remarks for each of the candidates. Same rules apply. Each candidate has 2 minutes to make their closing statement. At the end of 2 minutes, the microphone will be cut off. We're going to be doing the closing remarks in the reverse order of the opening remarks. So we're going to start at the far end of the table with Matt Kennedy and work our way down this way.
I'm proud to say that the New Blue Party is fielding candidates in all 124 ridings across this province. We seek to be an alternative option for Ontarians who are frustrated with the existing choices, for voters with conservative values who feel that the Ontario PC Party has moved too far to the left, who believe that Doug Ford has flip-flopped on nearly every issue and has had numerous failed promises from his 2018 campaign. Belinda Karahalios, in part, founded our party when she was kicked out of the Ontario PC Party for having the bravery to vote with her conscience and to vote for the way that she believed best served her constituents in the Cambridge riding. It's core to the New Blue Party's constitution that New Blue MPPs would be free to vote their conscience, that their votes will not be whipped, and that they will be allowed to fairly and accurately represent the needs and the wants of their constituents. New Blue MPPs would seek to balance the left, balance the narrative, and bring back accountability and transparency in Queen's Park. Thanks very much.
I believe that this election is the most important election in a generation, and the choice is yours to make. If you want a government that puts the needs of citizens over the needs of corporate interests, vote for the NDP. If you want a government that's committed to working with farmers every step of the way, vote for the NDP. If you want farmland protected from urban sprawl and developers, and your way of life preserved rather than have your farms paved over, vote for the NDP. For years, you've been asking both the Liberals and Conservatives to have the risk management cap lifted. They haven't, the NDP will. I remember hushed conversations between my parents about interest rates when I was a child. If I'm your MPP, I'll keep an eye on those interest rates, because for farmers, high interest rates can make or break you, and I'll advocate for programs to help farmers if the interest rates continue to go up. If you want a government that has a solid climate plan with a focus on a just transition so that no industry, including agriculture, is left behind and is supported, vote for the NDP. If you want a government that cares about the kind of education and health care your children and your grandchildren receive, an education that supports their individual strengths, teaches them to think critically and prepares them for their future, whatever that future may be, rather than subject them to factory cookie-cutter classrooms, then vote for the NDP. If you want excellent health care close to home with a solid plan to bring doctors and nurses to rural Ontario, vote for the NDP. If you're a senior or caring for seniors and you want them to receive safe, decent, dignified, and affordable care in their homes, vote for the NDP. Finally, no matter your age, if you want to continue living in rural Ontario communities, pay your bills, and ensure that your children, or when you retire, you can live in an affordable, safe home, vote for the NDP. Thanks again to the Huron County OFA for hosting and for your kind attention.
Huron County is a leading agriculture producing county in Ontario. And I'd like to thank farmers for your donations to food to local food banks, which was especially important during the pandemic. I'm impressed by the leadership of all commodities that advocate for measures that will keep your industry strong. I can assure you that the Ontario Liberals are listening. As your Liberal candidate, I played a leadership role in developing a rural Ontario agriculture policy platform. Stephen Del Duca and myself held a roundtable with local farmers at my farm last September, and our party held a rural summit last November. The Ontario Liberals will continue to support supply management for our dairy, chicken, turkey, and egg farmers. We will ensure that farmers have access to a well-funded risk management program that provides timely support. We will provide support for research and innovation to help farmers move into the future. We will support agricultural education and outreach and provide mental health for farm families. Most importantly, Ontario Liberals will ensure that those in the agricultural sector have a strong voice at Queen's Park. I believe that I would be the best candidate to represent Huron Bruce because I will follow through for my constituents in every sector. Politics is about public service. When someone contacts me for help, I will follow through. In my roles as a teacher, principal, and as a volunteer, I've always advocated for those who need help. Our Ontario Liberal policies will make life better for everyone in the agricultural sector and build stronger, more vibrant communities in Huron Bruce. Complex issues such as housing and climate change will require all levels of government to work together, and I will collaborate to help solve those issues. On June 2nd, please vote for change and vote for Shelley Blackmore. Thank you for giving me your time tonight.
Well, again, I'd like to thank the Huron Federation of Agriculture for hosting this opportunity for all of us to come forward and share our vision and our party commitments. So you have an informed opportunity to make a decision yourself in the advanced polls or on June 2nd. But I want to share with you, and I mentioned to Lori before, I was going to use her line in a moment though. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want a government that is absolutely dedicated to rebuilding our economy, if you want a government that is already and plans to continue in investing in key infrastructure, and if you want a government that has proven time and again that they're working for workers, and if you want a government that wants to keep costs down, and if you want a government that truly believes that agriculture and its supply chain can play a pivotal role as we move forward, then vote for Doug Ford and the PC candidates that represent his team throughout this province. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that Doug Ford is no mannequin. And some of you may already know that he is only literally a text away. And what does that mean for his team? We're only a text away. He is working nonstop to bring Ontario forward. As inflation rates go through the roof, we need a government that is dedicated to keeping taxes low. We'll grow our presence in Ontario by attracting new investment, new business, and new workers. That is how we're going to define prosperity under a PC government. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute honor to serve you over the last 10 plus years. I respectfully ask for your support again on June 2nd. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, it's for sure that this is a very important election. So first of all, those who locked you down, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but even after a mass vaccination program, they locked us down again. They locked down small business, not big business, but small business. They stole businesses. And it wasn't about the science, because the science said that the lockdowns were creating worse problems than COVID ever did. Suicides through the roof, people, mental health issues through the roof, and no one to take care of those people because, well, the healthcare system just didn't have the backing for that. But now these people want to be reelected. And then there's that other government group that raised our energy costs through the roof, and they want another kick at the can too. Where do we stop this? They weren't listening to us then, and they're not listening to us now. If you want a change, if you want a future for your family, then you have to change how you vote. Voting the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result is just insanity. So we need change. And I can tell you that a vote for myself and the Ontario Party is a vote for you, your family, your business, your job, your community, our community. Because we're listening. And we're listening. We want a government of the people, for the people. And that's the only way we can make change for the better, for our entire community and our province. Thank you.
The two-party system was birthed out of the French Revolution, and it has been used as a divide and conquer tactic ever since. okay? Oh, you're on the left, you're on the right. It's not about our people, it's about dividing our people, and there's so many divisions in our communities now, it's ridiculous. And we don't pick the candidate from our district, okay? The party picks the candidate, okay? And the parties are not working for you, the people. Now, I'd like you to go and read the Ultimate World Order, which is about 75 pages on CanadianTruths.wordpress.com. That will educate the hell out of you. You need to go to the Club of Rome. It was a conservative, Kim Mitchell, who was one of the founders of it. And it is a club of ex-prime ministers and presidents, all still pushing the agendas. And Kim Campbell was a conservative, and Jean Chrétien is in there as a liberal. Now, I've been offered to go to the other side many, many times. Not going to happen. I was asked to go with the Conservative Party, and I told him that I'm missing something, and he said, no, you're not. And I said, well, you see, I don't have the capacity to shake someone's hand, smile at them while I'm lying to them. And he said, oh, that. Well, if you ever change your mind, which I am not going to do,
Okay, that brings us to the end of the evening tonight. On behalf of the Huron County Federation of Agriculture, I'd like to thank Sandra Bilson and Arthur Bilson from Podium Postmasters for coming tonight. Brad from Exeter Music for controlling the sound system. All of the Huron County Federation directors who are here to help with questions and manning the mic and running and with the setup earlier today and take down later tonight. All the audience members who showed up tonight for your questions and your attendance to listen to our candidates. And lastly, I'd like to thank all the candidates who came out tonight for your participation in the meeting, for putting your name forward to run for office. And I wish you all the best in your campaign. And remember, vote June 2nd. Thank you, everybody.